Hi, my name is Anna Acunto from the University of Texas at Austin, and in this video I'll provide a brief overview of the manual contents and the needed materials for the Pirate Math Equation Quest Individual Intervention with Total Difference and Change Schemas. In the Pirate Math Equation Quest Individual Intervention, as seen in this picture here, one teacher works one-on-one with one student throughout the course of the intervention. The Pirate Math Equation Quest Individual Intervention was developed to support third grade students in Tier 2 and 3 small group and individual intervention who require supplemental math support in solving word problems. This intervention focuses on single and double-digit additive word problems in 3 schemas: total, difference, and change. Scientific evaluations of Pirate Math Equation Quest have indicated that at-risk third grade students with and without mathematics disabilities who performed in the lowest 13th percentile of their classes demonstrated improved word problem performance with Pirate Math Equation Quest as compared to students who did not participate in the Pirate Math Equation Quest intervention. The manual for this intervention includes 3 sets of materials: the teacher materials, the student materials, and the supplemental materials. The teacher materials include lesson guides, activity guides, and supplemental materials. The student materials include lesson packets and needed supplemental materials, and the supplemental materials include posters, maps, cards, and graphs. The supplemental materials seen here are included in a separate manual, but they're also included at the end of the teacher manual and the student materials manual as they're needed throughout all of the lessons. So in the Pirate Math Equation Quest intervention, there are 5 different components in each lesson. Lessons are implemented 3 times per week for 16 weeks, and each lesson lasts 30 to 35 minutes. These are the 5 components seen here. The first component of each lesson is Math Fact Flashcards, which is a 2 to 3 minute activity. The second component is Equation Quest, which is a 5-minute activity. The third component is Buccaneer Problems, which is a 15 to 18-minute activity. The fourth component is Ship Shape Sorting, which is a 2 to 3 minute activity. And the fifth component is Jolly Roger Review, which is a 5-minute activity. I'll review these 5 components on the following slides, and for more information you can also see our videos on each of these activities. So as I mentioned, the first component for each lesson is always Math Fact Flashcards, which is a 2 to 3 minute activity. In this activity, students complete 2 1-minute timed trials of addition and subtraction flashcards, an example of which is seen here. After each round, the teacher and student count the correct number of flashcards, and the teacher monitors and provides feedback throughout the activity as necessary using the counting up strategies. At the end of the activity, the student graphs their higher score for the lesson on the Math Fact Flashcard graph. The next component of each lesson is Equation Quest, which is a roughly 5-minute activity. In Equation Quest, students receive instruction on solving equations and the meaning of the equal sign. Students use cubes, as we see here, draw pictures, and isolate the variable, or x, to balance the equation and balance the 2 sides of the equation. This helps students develop their pre-algebraic reasoning and aids them in solving word problems during the Buccaneer Problems. The third activity is Buccaneer Problems, which is a 15 to 18-minute activity. In Buccaneer Problems, students receive schema-based word problem instruction as they work with a teacher to solve total, difference, and change word problems. We see students are also instructed on how to use the run attack strategy, which we see here. And then we also see the 3 schema posters for total, difference, and change problems, which students receive instruction in. So the Buccaneer Problems are a guided practice activity where the teacher and the student work together to solve the 3 word problems. And here we see an example of a Buccaneer Problem worksheet, which has 3 word problems. And here we see the first 2 word problems for this lesson. The fourth activity in every lesson is Ship Shape Sorting, which is a 2 to 3 minute activity. In this activity, students practice identifying word problem schemas learned during the Buccaneer Problems by reading word problem cards, an example of which is seen here. Students then sort the cards into the map, which is seen here, based during a 1-minute timing. Students sort the cards by identifying which schema a word problem belongs to: T for total, D for difference, or C for change. Finally, the last activity in each lesson is the Jolly Roger Review, which is a roughly 5-minute activity. In this activity, students complete a 2-part independent practice. The first part is the top portion of the Jolly Roger Review worksheet, which is a 1-minute timing and is generally one of 3 activities. It could be either a 1-minute timing for addition and subtraction problems, as we see here. It could be a 1-minute timing of bracketing the compare sentence and labeling G and L once difference problems are introduced. Or it could be practice writing the total difference in change equations. The second part of the Jolly Roger Review is the 2-minute timing for the word problem, as we see in the bottom here. Students take 2 minutes to use the skills they've learned during the Buccaneer problem and equation quest to independently solve the word problem. At the end of once students have completed both sections, the teacher provides feedback on both sections at the end of the activity. So here we see the lesson schedule for the individual intervention. There are 51 different lessons throughout the intervention. Lessons 1 through 4 focus on addition and subtraction computation. Oftentimes, students with math difficulties struggle with fluency in regrouping and require remediation of these skills to ensure correct computation when solving word problems. So, in our intervention, students learn explicit strategies to support addition and subtraction computation in these lessons, which you see here in lessons 1 through 4, and again in lessons 8 through 10 and lesson 16. Lessons 5 through 7 introduce total problems. Again, lessons 8 through 10 and lesson 16 again focus on addition and subtraction computation. Lessons 11 through 15 again focus on total problems. Lessons 17 through 25 focus on difference problems. Lessons 26 through 33 are a review of total and difference schemas. Lessons 34 through 43 are change problems. And finally, lessons 44 through 51 are a review of total difference and change schemas. So as I mentioned, the Power Math Individual Intervention Manual contains 3 sections: the teacher manual, the teacher materials, student materials, and supplemental materials. So first I'm going to talk about the teacher materials. The teacher materials consist of lesson guides, symbolized by this picture here, and activity guides, which we see an example of here. The teacher materials also contain supplemental materials, because supplemental materials are included at the end of the teacher materials, the student materials, and in their own separate section, I'll just talk about them when I come to the supplemental materials section. So we'll talk about them later. So on this slide, we see an example of a lesson guide. Lesson guides provide a step-by-step guide for teachers on how to implement a lesson. It's important that teachers review lesson guides before each lesson to ensure that they cover every concept addressed in the lesson. These lesson guides are not meant to be recited verbatim and instead should be used as a guide. Some teachers use them to create an outline, others kept them on hand as a reference during the lesson, and others rely heavily on the wording of the lesson guide to deliver the lesson. In any case, it's necessary that teachers study the lesson before delivering it to students. Throughout the lesson, teachers should also elaborate on concepts as necessary depending on the student. So if a student is not understanding a concept, teachers should elaborate whether or not it's in the lesson guide explicitly. You'll notice that each lesson is labeled with the corresponding lesson number. So the lesson guide for lesson 1 is labeled, as we see here, as lesson 1. The next portion of the lesson guide are the activities, which are listed in the scroll. We see math fact flashcards, equation quest, Buccaneer problems with the topics that are covered in Buccaneer problems that day. So in lesson 1, that's counting up addition and subtraction, ship-shape sorting, and the Jolly Roger Review. You'll notice that on the lesson guide for lesson 1, the equation quest and ship-shape sorting are crossed out. This means that those components are not part of this first lesson. Equation quest is introduced in lesson 3, while ship-shape sorting is introduced in lesson 7. So until those lessons, those components will be crossed out in the activities section. Next, we see the materials listed. We see the posters needed, student materials, and tutor or teacher materials. Teachers should review this list and have all materials ready prior to the lesson. Throughout the lesson guides, teacher dialogue is bolded and student responses are unbolded. When a new poster is introduced, it's signaled by italics with a picture of the corresponding poster. So here, the rules poster is introduced, so we see in italics, display rules poster with an image of the rules poster to signal that the rules poster should be displayed for students. Finally, it's important to note for the individual intervention, there are no lesson guides for lessons 26 through 33 and 44 through 51, as these lessons are review, and teachers should refer to the activity guides if they have questions or need more structure. The next component of the teacher materials are the activity guides. So here we see an example of the Equation Quest activity guide. So activity guides are for when teachers become familiar and comfortable with the lesson content and sequencing. They may then choose to print out and refer to the activity guides during the lessons. The activity guides highlight the procedures necessary for implementing core lesson components. So some teachers choose to exclusively use activity guides, while others prefer to use them in combination with lesson guides. There are activity guides for Math Fact flashcards, Equation Quest, the Run Attack Strategy, Total Problems, Difference Problems, Change Problems, Ship-Shape Sorting, and the Jolly Roger Review. So the next section in the individual intervention manual is the student materials. The student materials consist of the daily lesson packets, each page of which we see here, and the supplemental materials. And just like the teacher materials, I'll talk about the supplemental materials in the supplemental materials section of the introduction instead of after the student materials, but the supplemental materials are also included at the end of the student materials section of the manual, but I will talk about them later. So the student materials need for each lesson are the Equation Quest, Buccaneer Problems, and the Jolly Roger Review, and these are all organized into one packet by lesson. All of the lesson materials needed for the students are in one packet, again organized by day. So all the lesson 1 materials are in one packet, lesson 2 materials in the second packet, and so on and so forth. It is important for teachers should print these out ahead of time, double-sided and stapled in the top left-hand corner. And each packet contains 4 pages. Page 1 is always the Equation Quest. Page 2 and 3 are the Buccaneer Problems, which consist of 3 problems, A, B, and C. And the final page is the Jolly Roger Review, which has the top portion and the bottom portion. The Equation Quest, as I mentioned before, is practice solving equations, and students develop their understanding of the equal sign. You will notice, however, that there is no Equation Quest for lesson 1 and 2, so page 1 is left blank for those 2 packets. Equation Quest begins on lesson 3. Again, the Buccaneer Problems are a guided practice opportunity for students to solve word problems and for teachers to provide feedback. There are 2 pages, again, with problems A, B, and C, as seen here, A, B, and C. And the final page is the Jolly Roger Review, which is the independent practice activity. This is an opportunity for students to demonstrate their understanding of concepts. The top portion is a 1-minute timed activity that's one of 3 activities. It's either addition and subtraction fluency, practice bracketing the compare sentence and labeling G and L once difference problems are introduced, or lastly, it's practice writing the schema equations, so the total equation, difference equation, or change equation. The bottom portion is always a 2-minute timed word problem activity where students independently use the skills they've developed in Equation Quest and Buccaneer Problems to solve a word problem. After students have completed the worksheet, teachers score and review both sections. Students receive 1 point for each correct answer in the top portion and 2 points in the bottom portion. 1 point for a correct number and 1 point for a correct label for their word problem answer. The last section of the manual is the supplemental materials. So the supplemental materials contains teacher and student materials necessary for implementing the lessons. And again, as I mentioned before, these materials are found at the end of the teacher materials, the end of the student materials, and in their own section, the supplemental materials. The supplemental materials include the counting up, addition, and subtraction poster, as seen all the way here, the Math Fact flashcards, the Math Fact flashcard graph, the schema posters and Run Attack Strategy poster. So we see the Run poster there and the total poster here. And not pictured but also included are the difference poster, the change poster, and the what do you ask yourself poster. We also see the ship-shape sorting card and the ship-shape sorting mat. The supplemental materials also include the rules poster seen over here and 4 different versions of Pirate Math Equation Quest treasure maps. The supplemental materials section also lists materials which are required but not provided in the manual, such as a treasure box with prizes, treasure coins to put on the treasure map, a timer as we see here, different colored cubes, and a pencil. So So as I mentioned, the Pirate Math equation quest includes 5 posters for teachers to display throughout the lesson. So teachers need to print out these posters and display them during the intervention for students to utilize. Then as the curriculum advances, students become more familiar with the content on the posters, teachers can fade out the posters. So here we see the rules poster, which is presented in the beginning lessons or as needed to remind students of the behavior expectations. It's used in combination with the treasure map and the coins to create a behavioral token economy. And for more information, you can see our behavior management video or our motivation video. Here we see 4 examples, the 4 different versions of the Pirate Math Equation Quest treasure map to be used in the token economy. So during lessons, students earn coins and place them on the treasure map, and then color in the designated number of spaces at the end of the lesson. Once students have completed an entire treasure map, they receive a prize from the treasure box. It's important that teachers should print out a blank treasure map before the lesson, and they can vary the versions of the treasure map throughout the intervention, or they can use the same treasure map for each lesson, just depending on the student and the teacher's preferences. Again, for more information, you can see our motivation video. Next, we have the Counting Up poster, and this again is it's a poster that teachers need to print, preferably on cardstock, and display throughout the intervention for students to use. And like the rules poster, as students become familiar, teachers can begin to fade out the posters. So this is our Counting Up addition and subtraction poster. It's a strategy used in Pirate Math Equation Quest to aid students in the addition and subtraction computation during Math Fact flashcards, Buccaneer problems, and Jolly Roger review. And again, you can see our Counting Up video for more information on how to use this poster. Next, we see our Math Fact flashcards and our Math Fact flashcard graph. So the Math Fact flashcard activity, which is the first activity in any lesson, requires the flashcards and the graph, both of which are provided. So the addition and subtraction Math Fact flashcard should be printed out on cardstock and cut using a paper cutter, cut into fourths, prior to the lesson. There are addition and subtraction problems on the front of each card and the correct answer on the back of each card. The graph should also be printed out prior to the lesson so that it can be colored in by students during the Math Fact flashcard activity. And again, for more information, you can see our Math Fact flashcard video for more information on this activity. Next, we see our run and total poster, our difference and change poster, and our what do you ask yourself poster. As with all the other posters, teachers need to print them out and display them during the intervention for students to utilize. Once students become familiar with the content on the posters, teachers can then fade the posters. So first we see our run poster. Run is the attack strategy used to set up word problems in Pirate Math Equation Quest. Next, we see our schema posters. We see the total poster, difference poster, and change poster. So these are displayed as specific schemas are introduced. And each one displays specific steps for setting up and solving word problems after the schema is identified. Finally, we see the what do you ask yourself poster. So this poster is displayed after all 3 schemas have been introduced, which is about lesson 38, and it aids students in differentiating between the 3 schemas by providing a prompt. It also encourages students to use gestures and questioning to help them recall and differentiate the 3 schemas. Next, we see our ship-shape sorting mat and ship-shape sorting cards. So in the ship-shape sorting activity, students practice sorting word problems into schemas. To do this, they need the cards and the sorting mat, which are found in the supplemental materials. The cards have a word problem on the front and the corresponding schema on the back. So on the back will be a T for total, D for difference, or C for change. Just like with the flashcards, teachers should print these out and cut them before the lesson, and again, we suggest using cardstock to do this. The sorting mat should also be printed out before each lesson so that students can sort the cards onto the mat. Finally, we see a timer in the bottom, and this is necessary for this activity as it's a timed 1-minute activity, but teachers do need to provide their own as it's not included. Next, we see that the following materials are used throughout the program but are not included in this manual. So we see a treasure box with prizes. You can use any box that closes. It doesn't necessarily need to be a treasure box. And you can use any small prizes that students would like. And this is used at the end of the lesson when students have filled up all the spaces on the treasure map. Next, we also see treasure coins. Instead of, if you don't have treasure coins lying around, you can also use stickers, stamps, markers, or colored pencils to fill in the spaces on the treasure map. And these are used throughout the lesson to reinforce positive behavior. So when teachers see students following the rules and behaving correctly, the teacher reinforces the behavior by awarding the student a coin on the treasure map. Oftentimes a gold coin was also used as a special incentive for working hard, so a gold coin would represent 2 spaces on the treasure map as opposed to a silver coin which just represented 1. Next we see the timer, which is used in the Math Fact flashcards, Ship Shape Sorting, and the Jolly Roger Review. Again, this is not included, but it can be purchased at a teacher supply store. We also see a pencil. Students do need a pencil to complete each lesson. And finally, we see cubes. Cubes are used during equation quests to develop pre-algebraic reasoning, and they can also be purchased at a teacher supply store. So again, all these components are necessary to implement the intervention, but they are not provided. So now we're going to look at some examples of how a teacher might set up a space for a student to complete the intervention. So here we'll notice that we see the posters are displayed. We see the run poster, total poster, the difference in change poster, and the what do you ask yourself poster. The pencils on the table are sharpened, the rules poster is displayed, the treasure box is closed and displayed, and the timer is on the table and ready for the teacher to use. Let's look at another one. So here we'll notice that the posters are displayed. The run poster is stacked with the other posters in front of the student. The what do you ask yourself poster is on the table in front of the student, able for them to use. The lesson guide is stapled, printed out, and in front of the student. You'll notice here. The timer is on the table and ready for the teacher to use. The cubes are on the table and ready for the teacher to use. Pencils are sharpened. A treasure map with coins that the student has earned is in front of the student. That's what this is. And the treasure box is closed and displayed. Here we see another example of how to possibly set up a space to provide the intervention. So again, we see posters are displayed. The run poster and the schema poster are standing on the side where the student can see. The Math Fact flashcards are printed out and cut. The Math Fact flashcard graph is printed out and in front of the student. The timer is on the table and ready for the teacher to use, and the pencils are sharpened. The treasure map is also in front of the student. Finally, in our last example, you'll notice that the posters are displayed, ship-shape sorting cards are printed and cut out, the sorting mat is printed and in front of the student, the cubes for equation quest are out, pencils are sharpened, treasure map is printed out and displayed, and the teacher has lesson guides printed and available to reference during the lesson. So in this video, I provided an overview of the manual contents and the materials needed to implement the Pirate Math Equation Quest individual intervention for total difference in change schemas. I'd like to recognize IES, the University of Texas at Austin, and the Meadows Center for Preventing Educational Risk. Without their support, this research would not be possible. Thanks for watching.